All right, YouTube, what's happening? Ready to give my final review on this beauty right here. The Custom Knife Factory Rotten Designs Evolution 2.0. I did a first impressions video a while back. Dude, this... Let me just start by saying there's tons of hype around this knife. I paid way too much for this knife. And it was worth it. There's sometimes they are and sometimes they aren't. This is one of those things that's such a hard knife to get. And I almost hesitate to do reviews on these knives because they're just not obtainable. It's so difficult to get them, you know. They're not, can't just go to a website and buy one right now. You can only get to find one on the secondary market unless CKF does another run, which I hope they do, because I want the carbon fiber one. I just want it to be a little bit lighter. That's one of my criticisms. But anyway, this knife is worth the hype for sure. Absolutely. So nice. Like, my first impressions really haven't changed. It's something I've carried and used a lot. It's a big tanky knife. It's actually not that big though. Let's talk about that. So of course I'm gonna bring the SNG in. I brought it into the first impressions video. It's so similar. So much similarity between these two knives. Handle design's very similar. You can't help but look at it and think, yeah, that looks very Strider-esque. It's a little bit smaller than the SNG though, which I like. I like that. However, with that taller blade and this type of grind, just that blade shape, like almost like a cleaver, worny, there's a lot of belly. I mean, it's like a very unique blade shape. It's wider to carry in the pocket. I like the more streamline of the SNG, but it is a little smaller, so I like that. But very good comparison, I think, in size, especially. And the XM18, I thought was another one that was good. It's smaller than both of those knives. The Axon, which was my knife of the year so far. We'll talk more about that. A little bit slimmer knife, and then the Jaeger M, which is another really hyped, hard to get knife. I apologize. All the knives in this video you can't get. I apologize for doing that, and I don't blame you if you skip. So, but let's talk about the Evo, because let me go over the basic specs, kind of follow my typical review process here, and then we'll talk about my thoughts. So, you've got a blade length of 3.6 inches, overall length of 7.95, so just shy of 8. 0.18 inch blade thickness, and it weighs just over 5 ounces. Now I know the carbon fiber one is lighter. That was my preferred method, and I've tried to trade this for people for the carbon fiber. Hadn't had any luck so far. So if you got a carbon fiber one, you want to give us a little trade, I'm still interested in doing that. But let's talk about the specs that, you know, the other specs that are important, I think. This is a very wide blade, and we'll talk about that in carry. But look how far I have to pinch those calipers out. It's 1.5 inches wide, so it's a pretty wide blade. If you look at the SNG is, I mean, not a ton less, 0.147, but a little bit thinner. And it's also kind of a wider blade. Something like the Axon is going to be quite a bit, you know, 1.3 inches. So I know some guys don't like it to be over an inch, which I think is really hard to find a knife that way. But like a Para 3, for example, because of that hump, if you measure at that hump, you know, it's 1.5 inches. It's 1.5, 1.6. So it's a little wider. So, you know, in hand, if you look at the overlap of the hole, the Para 3 is actually a little wider, and that's one of my favorite EDC knives. So, yeah, not a big deal. Just getting it out there that it is a little wide. Its thick handle thickness is just a hair over half an inch, so it's really good there. Don't mind that at all. And this is where it gets good though, because you see a big knife like this, and you think, and a lot of guys don't think this is a big knife. To me, this is still a big knife. It's a medium-sized knife, but it's pretty big. It's thin behind the edge, like under 15 thousandths. I'm getting 14.5 thousandths. This is where this knife, to me, is awesome, because you get it's overbuilt, right? This is a big overbuilt, you know, folder, and a lot of these big overbuilt folders, they're not thin behind the edge. Strider's gotten a lot better. This is a lot thinner behind the edge than the old school Striders are, but it's not that thin. I mean, it's probably 18 thousandths. Yeah, man, I called that perfectly. This is 18 thousandths, which is an improvement for Strider. This is way thinner behind the edge. So you got a big stout blade. You've got this, your blade thickness is stout. It's 1.77 inches in blade thickness. Whereas the S&G this is the fatty. This is a fatty. It's gonna be a little bit thicker, 1.88. So, but it's got a thick blade stock, right? And a lot of guys think thick blade stock's not gonna cut well. Wrong. It's all about that edge geometry, and look how this grind just comes up like this. You get so much thinness behind the edge. Like if we measure at the tip, if I remember, it's very consistent from heel to tip. Tip's a little thicker at about, well, I'm pretty high up on that one. Let's go where I need to go. Yeah, you're still under 8, you're about 17 thousandths at the tip. And back at the heel, that feels a little thicker. No, you're still around 17, 18 thousandths, but your belly is really, really thin, and that's where you do most of your cutting, right? So it's just, for an overbuilt tank of a knife, it's an excellent cutter, very slicey, and that's what I like about it. So I guess we'll talk about that. Edge cutting performance is excellent on this. Very good. I've used it for a plethora of things. Cardboard cutting is the majority of what I do, but did my standard testing that I do with wood processing, stuff like that, to test ergos, to test how the edge cuts. Fantastic, no problems there at all. Speaking of ergonomics, might as well go there next. So I think they did a good job of somewhat mirroring the Strider ergonomics, because Strider ergonomics are pretty legendary in my opinion, and they're very similar on this knife. It has that choil right here. It's pretty neutral minus the choil, but the choil is big enough that no matter your hand size, it should work. But you have that forward choil also. So I can choke back on this without any issue and still have a 4-finger grip. If I put up in the choil, very comfortable as well. The jimping goes far enough forward that even if you're on that forward choil, it's still very locked in, which is really good design. And if you're back here, it's locked in. So really good design there. Ergonomic wise, if you have big hands, you're gonna have to choke up on this knife, but that's okay because it's still long. You got it from here to here to hold the knife. I mean, what's your width there, your diameter? You've got almost 5 inches. So, 4.7 inches from here to here is pretty good. So, yeah, just feels great in hand. It's thick in the handle, so it's gonna, if you're doing hard cuts, really bearing down the hammer grip, you're fine. Yeah, it's not gonna. I found the ergonomics to be perfectly good. So ergos are great. Let's talk about action. Action, get out of here. It's so nice. It is obviously middle finger flickable. You can use that to deploy it. It's not. Yeah, I've got this pivot, guys, absolutely tightened down. Like this is, you can't get any tighter than this, because when I got it, and I'll talk about it now. When I got it, it developed blade play very quickly. It hadn't been Loctited, which I guess Custom Knife Factory doesn't do that from the factory. They don't Loctite these knives, so they kind of rely on the user to do that. So I went and Loctited the pivot, and I didn't have any issues with the pivot. It's a pretty good sized pivot. I want to say it's at least a T15, maybe T20, pretty good sized pivot. And since I Loctited it, I haven't any issues with it walking back. So that was when I wanted to wait after a lot of extended period of use, because I had that problem. I know Left EDC had that same issue. He had some issues with getting this knife back together with the pivots. Even though it looks like it's not a free spinning pivot, kind of is. And that's a negative in my opinion. We'll talk about that. But other than that, but I didn't have any issues disassembling. I didn't have any issues with it walking back or anything like that after Loctite. So that's been great. So the action is fantastic. It's super fidgety, but it's also, it's just a fidgety knife. It's not, look, it's pretty drop shut. And I just use the standard bearings that Custom Knife Factory includes. What's awesome too is they include a extra set of bearings, pivot, and all hardware. So if you lose anything, you replace something, you're golden. You get it with the knife. So fantastic. All right. So we talked about cutting. We talked about ergonomics, action. Let's talk about how it carries. So it's going to be fat in your pocket. I'm not going to lie to you about that. It is absolutely 100% a pocket hog. If you don't like that, then probably not worth the hunt, even though I think it is. It's awesome, but it's definitely wide. Like, look at this guy. It doesn't deep carry, so it's a lot of knife sticking out, and it's like that wide in the pocket. So it's a pocket hog. There's no getting around it. It's 100% a pocket hog. Very similar to Strider, though. Like I said, a little thicker than a Strider, and I'm used to carrying Striders constantly. So if you're a Strider fan, you will freaking love this knife, no doubt in my mind. So carry, it's not the best, let's be real. And it's a little heavy, 5 ounces for this size of knife. But it's so thick and overbuilt. I mean, the SNG is around the same. So not a big deal to me, but because when I carry this knife, I'm not carrying it in like basketball shorts or something, you know what I mean? I'm carrying it in jeans or I have enough support, you know, no big deal. So carries is fine on this guy. So value, that's where things get very cloudy on this, and it's kind of a hard conversation because I'm not even sure what these sold for. I want to say $450-ish for this plain titanium version. The other ones are more expensive. The carbon fiber was a little bit more. They had some Damascus stuff, Zerk stuff going on, lots of options, and but this is the base model, and it I think was around $450. The secondary market is extremely higher on these things because they're not available, but they're a limited run piece. But I definitely overpaid for this knife, and I'm not telling you what I did, and I'm not proud of it. But at the same time, I felt like it was a good deal at the time versus other sellers were selling it for, so I snagged it off late forums. They're really hard to get. They go fast, but to me, it is worth paying more than retail on this knife. It really is. It's fantastic. I think it's one of the best designs that we'll see in 2021, and it has replaced the Axon already as my knife of the year. And I know I just did this video and I said this is my knife of the year, and at the time it was, and it's still fantastic and I love it. But this guy took it up a step. It took it up a notch. It is a step above, no doubt. And it's so Strider-esque that and I've always been a big Strider fan. So to me, it's like I'm gonna like it a little bit more than maybe you would, because if you're a big Strider fan like I am, you're gonna really like this knife. It's so much like a Strider, but it's just such a well done design. The finish on it, oh, bumping the tripod is awesome. The finish on it's fantastic. I mean, look at the finish on the titanium. This is your base model. Nice backspacer. Yeah, it's the finish, fit and finish is fantastic as well. I know some have had people with that issue with the pivot, and that is one negative, I will say. So let's get to the negatives. Is there any? Yeah. The jimping's a little overkill. It's a little aggressive. They took Strider's jimping and took it up a notch, I think, and I think that's too much. You can see it's very, very similarly jimped to an SNG, and you even have the same blade stop design and everything right there. So it's very similar, but it's a little. It's not overly aggressive, but it's a little sharp. That's a nitpick, big time. Okay, guys, that's not. Don't go out and not buy this knife if you get a chance because of that. The geared backspacer works great too. And I would say it's just a little fat and wide and heavy, but those are all easily worth, not a big deal to me. They are nitpicks. They are things I think I would like the carbon fiber version because it'd be a little lighter, but there is milling on the scales internally. So they're both milled. So the full titanium version is about as light as you're going to get for this size of knife with this thick of, materials and such. But overall, those are my only nitpicks. Really, they are. That's it. Which is not much, right? I think, and maybe the cost. Cost at retail, absolutely worth it. Secondary market price, it's worth what you pay for it, right? It's worth what you're willing to pay for it, right? That's the whole saying. It is true, but I still think it's a little high. Like you're talking, I'm seeing them go for $800, and I'm like, that it's not quite up there, but it is still really nice. And I am, I did overpay it, and I'm okay with it, and it's gonna stay in the collection for a long time. So it has surpassed the Axon as my 2021 knife of the year. It's only April, subject to change, as you saw with the Axon very quickly. All right, guys, I'm gonna wrap this up. I've been going for a while. It's almost 15 minutes long, so let's wrap up the video. Let me know your thoughts on the CKF Evo 2. I wish it was more readily available, just like the Axon. Wish that was more readily available, just like the Jaeger M. These are my top three knives of the year right here. So top three, no doubt. I'm gonna do a full review on this soon, very soon. All right, guys. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.